Hassan Barari, he's a professor of international affairs at Qatar University. Hassan, thank you for joining us again. This US veto for the Palestinian bid, another Palestinian bid, it feels like it comes, though, in a shifting international landscape where we are actually seeing more and more countries in favour of recognising Palestine as a full member.
Yeah, it is obvious that the majority of states around the world came to the realization that probably the only way for solving or resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict is by empowering the Palestinians and giving them a state. And it seems that only the United States who is not really on board, and they actually making the case that this should come after negotiation. Problem here, that when you say this, you give the Israelis the right to veto any outcome, because the Israelis have not been really forthcoming when it comes to giving the Palestinians their own right to self-determination. So yes, as you said from the get-go, there's more people, more countries around the world that realize that the Palestinians should be given their independence and should be admitted to the United Nations as a full member, not as an observer.
Well, we'll see where those conversations go. I do also want to ask you about Rafah. Obviously, the US has been pretty vocal about what they view would be a mistake in Rafah in recent weeks. They're now having these conversations with the Israelis. How much influence and leverage does Washington have right now on what Israel decides in the south?
Well, prior to the Iranian attack on Israel, the Americans seem to me having more probably the leverage to influence Netanyahu. But now with the attack, I think this has eased. And now Netanyahu feels that, his country was the victim, and now he has the right to continue whatever he wants to do. His argument to the Americans and to everyone else that the total victory will not be achieved without moving into Rafah. The problem here is that what are you going to do with the humanitarian dimension of the conflict? How many people are you going to kill? How many civilians are going to be displaced? And all these questions are actually being debated with the Americans. But it seems to me that the Americans have been moving slowly but surely toward Netanyahu's decision to move into Rafah.
Well, if Netanyahu is now feeling emboldened, he's still saying to the US that they will try to protect civilians. We're hearing from our correspondent about vague plans for evacuations. We still don't know where people would even be evacuated to. We're talking about 1.5 million people. Yeah. Is something of that scale even possible, given what's already happened in Gaza?
I don't see this as happening in a safe way. I think what the Israelis are trying to do is to give the impression that they care about the civilians, but they don't, given the toll. And more than 34,000 people were killed, and maybe 80,000 people were injured. 80% of the houses were demolished. So they really not qualified morally to talk about this. And indeed, what they're interested is just, it's a smoke screen behind this. It conceals what the Israelis are trying to do is to dismantle Hamas and to achieve a total victory at any cost.
Well, so let me ask you then about the US perspective on this, because they're saying they share this objective of defeating Hamas and Rafah, but they do believe it's possible to do that while protecting civilians. What are the Americans proposing? Some kind of limited special ops kind of mission?
Well, I think all these statements coming from Biden's administration are performative. I mean, they're just, playing to the ears of the Americans, because there are a lot of critiques in America about how Biden's administration has supported Israel. So he's trying to assure them that America still cares about humanitarian aspects, but at the same time, he's playing into the hand of Netanyahu. Netanyahu has been good at manipulating the American administration to his own, and he's moving slowly but surely. And the Americans who were like saying no to invasion of Rafah now say yes, but, and this is, when you give the Israelis yes, but it means, this is like a green light.
Well, another critical part of the humanitarian picture here is obviously that Rafah is the primary entry point for land crossings of aid into the Gaza Strip, for the whole Gaza Strip at the moment. We've seen the Israelis in recent weeks open, or I should put that in inverted commas, open another crossing in the north where we're seeing very little aid come through. I've been wondering whether that's been preparation for some kind of Rafah offensive and what the broader impact on aid a huge land offensive in the south would be.
Well, I think this is part of the Israeli propaganda that they care about the Palestinians, because the Americans who were like criticizing Israel for not allowing for the aid to come into Gaza, and now with the American, just last night they were talking about the improvement in the humanitarian aspect. But, you know, the Israelis, they really don't care about the Palestinians. They don't see them as human. They see them as subhuman, you know, given the way they refer to them as Amalek, and also the Minister of Defense are talking about them as even animals, human animals, they call them. But, you know, they want to... they want the international community to be assured that Israel is taking care of the aid, but you know, at the same time, we know that the Israelis were trying actually to kick the Palestinians and expel them. So starvation is one of the weapons used by the Israelis.
And effectively, a ground offensive in Rafah would pretty much cut off the only path in for aid as it stands.
It would make it really tough for the Palestinians.
Hassan Barari, thank you for joining us again on the Al Jazeera News Hour.
Sure.